All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. We've got with us today Brett Young with Urban Young, and I am pumped, dude, to have this conversation. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Good to see your face. I appreciate it. Last time we spoke, I think it was in Texas at One City World Tour, so it's good to reunite.
That's right. And we got Ryan, perfect timing, jumping back on with some technical difficulties, but he's here.
Can you hear me?
I got you. You're here.
All right.
How we doing, Ryan?
Brett, I owe you a lot for this train wreck. I apologize.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah,
You
so when we were down at One City, man, we were talking about a couple interesting topics that I thought would be really fun to dive into on the show. Number one, you gave your talk to the group, and then some of the side conversations we were having, but all centered around, the concept, and we refer to it a little bit differently, but, we always talk about our industry is very good at building books of business and not necessarily building a business. And what we find out is you think of the natural progression of firms is usually built on one person building a really solid book of business and then bringing in, other people to go do the same thing. But if you're not building a business, you're just perpetuating that cycle of everybody doing their own thing, building their own books. And hopefully most of the time there aren't that many rock stars out there like that initial person that are just going to go do, right? And so you have kind of a similar thought process of building an agency versus building a business, right? So walk us through kind of your thoughts around that concept and how you articulate it, because I think it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, that's actually a great way to say it, building a book of business instead of a business. I usually will yell from the top of a mountain, stop building an agency and start building a business, because we get lost in this idea that, once we get our license, we're a professional. All of a sudden, the idea of entrepreneurship and enterprising something goes out the window. And one of the biggest things before we turned on the camera, and you just hit on it, was I think that there's a misconception about building a business, right? We become this sales professional, we have success, and then we think, all right, well, the next step is let me go find other people to do what I did. Well, that sounds great, but you've missed 3 steps before that, right? Like, you're good at something. Shouldn't you build a mousetrap around the skill set that you have to support that, instead of trying to duplicate exactly what you're doing and silo what you're doing? Because what happens is people hit plateaus. They plateau. Even the person that started it, like they get to the point where they have too much coming in, not enough time, they don't have support, and they haven't created these systems and processes to be able to scale. And so the next step is, well, I want more revenue. Okay, well, let me go hire another producer. Let me go find another producer. So we all have these, independent contractors, these mini businesses inside of our business that are running at their own pace, at their own speed, building these things, which is fine for a while, until what happens to them is the exact same thing that happened from the person that started it, which is they hit a plateau and they go, well, the only way to do it from here is, they change a split, or they have to change this. They think it's a structure situation, or they want to go somewhere else because they don't have this, there's just this perpetuation of the same problem that happened from the founder or the person that started it, which is predicated off of the idea that you just said, is they didn't look at it as far as building the business itself, like something to support volume, rather than just trying to recreate, what worked for them up into a certain level. And we never had that. I guess in the commercial space, you can go get higher price points, right? If I hit a cap on my capacity, I can just go, okay, well, instead of me writing $100,000 accounts, I can go after $300,000 accounts. Yep. So at least there's a lever there that I can move. In the personal lines game, you don't have that. Like, you don't have that lever to pull. I can't go, okay, instead of me writing $1,000 homeowners policies, I'm going to go try to find $3,000 homeowners policies. Like, it doesn't work that way. So what I have learned from doing this on this side, is from dealing with a lot of volume, is that you have to begin with the end of the in mind, right? Like, you have to build the bucket that can handle the volume first. And then, you don't just go get another bucket. No, you replace that bucket with a bigger bucket. right? Like, and so that's
Yeah.
probably my best way to articulate the examples. We end up having this leak in the roof, and we have 4 little mini buckets spread out over the table trying to catch all the water instead of just replacing it with one big one. And I think that's a thing you see a lot.
Yeah. So that's a good perspective on, give everybody the background quick. I didn't have you kind of jump into you guys, but what you were talking about there with you had to figure out the bigger bucket essentially because you couldn't pull as many levers, right? So because you guys are focused in the PL space mostly, walk through that a little bit just so everybody's got some perspective.
Yeah. So I mean, my background was team building. You know, I came from the network marketing space. I did it for 5 years, did it at a high level, learned from some of the best network marketers in the world, essentially. And I learned some concepts at that point about leverage. I learned about team building. I learned about organizational structure. I learned about duplicating efforts, supporting systems. And so me and my partner, we brought that into the property and casualty space. And so at this point today, about 10.5 years in, we're about 4 million in revenue. We did about $1 million in revenue in new business last year. And I say that only to say in the personal line space, that's a lot of volume, right? Like it's not a small amount of transactions. So in order for you to support that many transactions and continue to grow, you have to have a big bucket, and you have to continually swap that with a bigger bucket. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages that we had early on was that you face this problem a lot. Like you hit this plateau and then you're frustrated and you don't know what to do. And then you get past it and then you hit the plateau. And this happens about 4 or 5 times until you go, okay, this is a pattern. Like this is a pattern. This is a recurring theme. So it's not a problem with the model. It's the way that it is, right? I should embed this solution to this inside of my process instead of trying to get to the point to where I can't go any further and then trying to change everything, right? Like we get to the point where we're stuck and we go, oh man, I got to change a bunch of stuff. I got to pivot, you know, and I think that happens to everybody. It's just a matter of what's your antidote to be able to getting to the next level. You know, you're usually this close. You don't need to recreate your whole business.
Yeah. Well, it's being thoughtful about it, you know, and that's where I've noticed in, you know, talking with you that you guys have been thoughtful over the years of what and who and how do we want to build this thing? Who do we want to be? What's our why? That's so important because, again, I think so many people get into our industry because, you know, they knew somebody, they got licensed, everybody needs insurance, you know, type of thing. And it is, you know, if you're a grinder, you're a hustler, right? That type of model, like you can go out and create a heck of a lifestyle. But to your point, if you're trying to build a business, you know, you got to be thoughtful about it. You got to think what's upcoming, you know, when I get to that next plateau, how am I going to overcome that? And that's just, if you look at so many things in our industry, I think that's where companies get held back and they start off on the wrong foot. Right. And now, like, I mean, we've had to do that over the years where you're trying to shift an already existing business that is set up as a bunch of different businesses. Right.
Yeah. I mean, if it does, go ahead, Ryan.
I'm sorry, Brett. Yeah. Well, you scaled as the, you know, principal agent. You scaled by adding more agents and duplicating what you did. And then ultimately the problem gets so big and the hurdles become so high that you can't, you know, you can't recreate yourself. And so you sell. That's what happens. You know,
so good. And how about you defined your business scalability and the revenue, but you didn't help the producer scale. Like, is your process enabling the producer to scale? Because if you don't have a system that allows the producer to scale, they're going to leave you. They're just going to hit a point to where like, I can't grow anymore. Right. And we all know that we all need growth. We all want that, you know, if you're a good producer, then inherently that's an instinctual thing that you need. You want to be chasing something. So yeah, that's a great point, Ryan, where you're like, all right, cool. I've hit this point. I'd rather just start over and start fresh, whether it's in this industry or out of it, because I just don't know where to go from here.
Well, there's so many issues with, you know, if you, let's say you want to scale by adding more buckets to keep the same theme, you know, if you add 12 buckets that are all chasing different things, growing at their own pace, doing their own thing, like how in the hell do you corral all of those people to subscribe to a new way of building a business and scaling a business and not building individual books.
God, you could spend an hour on that one, man. I think there's a lot of people that are probably in that situation right now and or going that route. And man, I would just scream from the top of a mountain and say, man, just be careful going down that path, because it's hard to reverse that, right? Without creating animosity, because that person didn't sign up for that, right? They signed up for what you sold them, so like now you're trying to reframe all these people that have all these different lives and all these different wants, and now you become the bad guy of like, oh well, you guys changed. And it's like, well, yeah, we changed, but we did something that wasn't scalable. We did something that wasn't, duplicatable. And to your point, Elliot, like I just think if you can do a transaction and it works, the whatever you do for one transaction, it's got to work with 10,000.
Yeah.
And if you come from a framework and that mindset, it says, like, okay, if this works with one, it's got to work with 10,000. And if the answer is yes, you're beginning with the end in mind, start there, do that. What most people do is they do the easy thing, not the thing that makes sense, right? It's like, well, I just do it this way because it's easier. Yeah, but that's not what scales, and that's not what duplicates, and that's not going to allow you to have this long runway of growth. And we sell ourselves short because, we take the easy route, and inherently that's where we meet that plateau and go, okay, wait a second, something's off here, something didn't work. And that's because you put something in motion that, it duplicated. It just, the problem was it duplicated the wrong thing, duplicated.
Yeah, the problem
Totally.
duplicated.
Right, there you go, exactly.
Yeah. And we're not spending the right amount of time thinking about it from that perspective. So I want to make sure everybody catches that, which I thought was a great way to frame it. Whatever you do for one transaction, you have to do for 10,000. And if you think about it that way, I guarantee it will change the way you do or the system you put in place to do this one transaction. And again, if you don't want to scale, if you're, creating a lifestyle business or whatnot, then totally fine. Keep doing what you're doing. It is dependent upon the type of business you want to build, right? But if you are looking to scale and grow, do yourself a favor and think about it from the end in mind and where you want to get to, because that will be, huge. Good.
Yeah, and I want to give a practical example for somebody that's listening to this and say, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, how is that thing? Let me give you one that we're wrestling with right now. But by the way, this never goes away. Like, and this never goes away. It just depends on which one it is and which one you're trying to solve. And so we've moved from, just having a strict AMS to having a CRM. So we're building out a completely customized, we have a developer on retainer, like we're building a complete platform specific for Urban Young that's CRM driven. And one of the challenges we're having is, when agents are moving to closed one on the CRM, they're supposed to enter it into the AMS. Well, the challenge with that, or it can automate to the AMS, right? Like, but the problem is people are so used to using the AMS that they're putting it in the AMS because that's where we log all the commissions, and they're forgetting to put it over as closed one. So us in our grades of thinking think, oh, well, we have this process. It's very simple. You just move it to closed one and you put it in the AMS. Well, we're duplicating the problem. So the numbers that we're getting aren't coherent with what they actually are, because people are responding and being compliant in the AMS because that's where they pull their numbers. So what we did is say, okay, this is a perpetuation of the problem, like Ryan said. So what we needed to do is restrict the wall access. So what we've done is we're creating basically it's a customized form to where, and when they move to close one, no one has the ability to create the profile in the AMS, right? We're either automating it or our VA team puts all the information in the AMS. So now the only way for you to get credit for the sale that you made is to move it over in the CRM, and then it automates to the AMS. That is a duplicatable process, right? That is something that's scalable. And now it's not like, and only some people were having the problem. Some people were doing it right, but we didn't need to go, okay, well, we're going to restrict access for these people, and these people are doing it right, so we're going to allow them to do it. No, that's not a symmetrical process, right? So it's like, okay, this obviously doesn't work for the 1,000 transactions. For some people it works, but for some it doesn't. So we had to rethink the problem and go, okay, beginning with the end in mind, what's the way that we get the outcome we're looking for 100% of the time? So that's just one little small example, and there's, it's infinite. Higher the level, the bigger the devil,
I like that.
I like that too.
Yeah,
100%. And like, I think a lot of people approach that as in, with the stick method. Well, just get our freaking people to enter it in it the right way. Like we've got the process laid out, like what the heck? Do we need to train them more? Do we need to
have another sales call. We need to have
Yeah.
another sales call. And I'm going to really hammer home the point here. It's like, no. You need a systematic process to where there's just, it guarantees a result every time. And that's hard to think about. It's annoying. It's tedious. It takes thought. It requires you to slow down, and all of these things are you amplify this by 6 different problems, and it's easy to just go, I'm not going to deal with that today.
Big.
Yeah, it gets big fast. And Ryan and I were just having this conversation this morning, weren't we, on some of the stuff we're trying to do with launch? It's the same problem, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're because you're ultimately building, there's a version that you're absolutely right. You got to forget about it because, you're doing it for the non-compliant folks that like don't see the value. And you're like, oh, why do I have to jump through all these hoops to make this easier? Or they could just go do it. Right. But ultimately, I think people are, it's just ingrained in all of us to take the path of least resistance. It gets the quickest result. And so, essentially what you're doing is just changing the obstacle course in which they go get their cheese, i.e. paycheck. It's like, well, you don't get paid unless if this button gets clicked. And how often, how much of your mousetrap is built around that?
God, that's a good question. I don't think anyone's asked me that before, Ryan. Let me just make sure I understand what you're asking me. You're asking me how much of the mousetrap, the systems, processes, methods that we have in place are built from a standpoint of wherever the path to the cheese is, that is what guarantees the outcomes we're looking for. Is that your question?
Yeah, basically, if you don't do this, you're not getting paid.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I've changed my philosophy on this a little bit, unfortunately. I used to have because it's the law of large numbers are just that, like, inherently human behavior becomes proficient. Like it just screams at you all of a sudden. It's like I can't really tell what one human being is going to do, but give me 50 human beings and I can pretty much guarantee what you're going to get. Yep. It's like, so to answer your question, Ryan, we have had to change some methodologies because we ran up with some resistance where people weren't engaged in the activity that they should be engaged in because, they knew it was a good idea. They knew it was important. We had trained on it. Philosophically, they knew the why behind the what. But inherently on a Tuesday when it's 2:00 in the afternoon, your guard comes down and you don't do what necessarily you should. We're all human. And so we have had to create simple changes that, essentially guarantee the result that we're looking for. And I'll give you an example to that, Ryan. We had to change our comp plan about a year ago. And from a leadership perspective, that's the last thing you want to do. It's like, in my opinion, it's like the nuclear, button, it's like the last thing you want to do is go to a salesperson and be like, hey, I'm changing your comp. It's so funny to me. These corporate guys, like they tell me all the time, yeah, our comp plan changed every single year. I'm like, I don't know how you did that. Yeah, I don't know how you did that. But it's a good reminder to us that it's okay to change things, But in this, we come from the camp that leadership is consistent. It always says the same thing. It says it over and over and over and over again, and therefore people can trust it. And if people can trust it, then they will fall in line over a long period of time. So when you change stuff like this, it has danger associated with it. So it's not to be taken lightly. But what we were giving a residual bonus based on a book of business, based on inherently a production number. And we weren't writing the right type of business. We weren't writing enough auto insurance. We're very home driven. That's our model. We cater to the real estate space, and we were very home driven. That's where our lead gen comes from. And so we weren't getting the right auto output that we should be, right? Because everybody can write a home. It's an order taking, to write the other lines is a real sales professional. So everybody understands that. They knew that. They heard, but we had auto bonus that's. So if you hit the auto bonus, you get a positive outcome. So the idea was, yes, you have this, but we're going to give you an extra incentive to do what we're asking you to do. And what's so fascinating to me, no matter how much money you threw at this, people would not build it into their process. Yep. There was so much money available, and we would run these like quarterly bonuses like every once in a while, and people would go, okay, great. I mean, I'd do it for a month, but just like ingraining in your process, we just weren't getting the outcomes, Ryan. And we essentially said, okay, this is ridiculous. We're not doing this anymore. So we linked them, meaning that the residual component of the bonus had to have a qualifier of a certain amount of autos, and then it's tiered. So essentially what we did was, instead of making two different ways to getting paid, we combined them into one. And we saw literally within 2 months, 40% increase in auto production instantly overnight, right? Like, so to your point, the cheese was moved. I didn't want to do it. I hate that. It sucks. But the bottom line is human behavior is human behavior, and it worked instantly. And that's kind of comes back to this conversation that we had at One City World Tour, Elliot, was the fact that the meaning of the autos changed for them. Like, you know, the how important it was changed overnight. And because it changed, their focus changed. So it's like, wherever we're trying to move the cheese, wherever we're trying to pull levers, it's like, if you can tug at the meaning lever to where it means more, then inherently it's going to get the focus that it deserves.
Yeah, there's this pain threshold that you have to cross in order for them to, or eliminate, maybe. I guess what I'm trying to say is, because we had this exact same experience in personal lines, actually, where we changed the compensation to drive a certain behavior. And 3 weeks later, we're like, well, apparently nobody cares about how much money they're making. Like, they literally could care less how much cash they were making, because the pain, the associated pain of, you know, going and doing that new activity just wasn't, it wasn't worth the pain that was required to go do it. And so like, if there would have been a threshold or something talking through that, it might have incentivized different behavior.
You know, I think it's like defining the game. You know, I think everybody needs a game, and I think it needs to be defined. And with the way, you know, as an operator, you know, our job is to create these mini games inside the macro. And to your point, Ryan, like the pain versus reward threshold, you can tell real quick if it's off, because you're not getting the coherence, right? And that's where it's like, okay, well, cool. There's either not enough pain, or there's you know, it's just not worth the activity, right? The activity is more painful than the actual money that's being taken away, right? And so that could drive every single process and system in your entire organization. And candidly, I drive my own personal process with that. I'm no different. Like, I'm not outside of that. Like, we're all human beings, and it's pain and pleasure every single second of the day. So like, I'm trying to set up pain thresholds in my life, and that either create friction or create less friction in order to get some sort of behavior. So for example, I have a trainer that comes to my house every single, you know, well, not every single day, but majority of the week. And this morning I woke up and I'm like, man, that's the last thing I want to do. I'm almost like annoyed to the point where it's like, the dude's showing up at my house. Like, I can't almost like not open the garage, you know? I'm like, sorry, no one's home today.
Nobody's home.
Right? It's like, dude, I see the cars outside. I know you're home, you know? But the point is, number one, I'm creating friction from accountability perspective, but I'm also reducing friction because I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is walk out of my house, right? It's not enough to say, well, I just want to go to the gym because I know it's important to me. I want to write more autos because I know it's important to rounding out the client. I want to fill in the blank with whatever behavior you're trying to challenge for yourself or somebody else. It's like, there needs to be friction, and there also needs to be a reduction of friction. And I think if we define the game and we create incentives, I think that's all we're doing.
I totally agree. I think too, which I feel like would have a very similar thought process on this, is because you mentioned it earlier, the why behind the what. You know, make sure if we're going to be making these changes, we are explaining why, and we're doing that 10 times more than you think you need to. Before you ever make this change, is make sure that when you make the change, everybody's like, oh, okay, I don't like it, but it makes sense. Like, it's what you've been talking about, Brett, you know? So maybe speak to that, how you guys approach that, because you mentioned it a bit there.
You know, I'll give you a vulnerable, transparent example. I'm usually pretty good at that. And I have made a mistake recently, and I'll share that with you. And I think it has to do with going fast. I think it has to do with the fact that you want to go fast. And there is a big boogeyman that comes from that when you're leading people. And so this CRM push that we've had, it's a massive undertaking. Like, my brain hurts. It's just a massive undertaking. It requires all three of us. I have two awesome partners. It's a significant time spent of planning, with development, with thinking, with recalibrating, with changing. It doesn't work, right? There's just and you guys have it a little, you guys have experience in this tech space too. So I'm a novice, but it's a lot, man. And more importantly than that, it puts a lot of pressure on the team because they're used to doing it a certain way. And, you know, we set out on this journey, and, you know, you send a message out, and we're on a call, and I give this exciting news of what we're doing and cast a vision of how incredible this is going to reshape our business and all of this stuff. But I did it one time, and I just assumed that everybody would get it like we get it
super
and
excited about
see
it.
exactly. And so we were in a leadership meeting about a month ago, and I said something. I was like, hey guys, like, look, here's the deal. We used to have one office in one location. Now there's 6. Everyone's spread out. Everyone's doing different things. From a leadership perspective, it's like driving through the rain and you can't see in front of you, and you're trying to make decisions. And in order for you to protect the team and make good decisions that help people continue to ascend, you have to be able to see what's next to make good decisions. And without this, we can't see. And somebody piped up and said, you have to tell people that. Like, I didn't even know that. Like, that right there makes me feel infinitely better about this project, because I just didn't really understand it. It's just been a pain in the ass. And I just thought it was just that we were going to make more money. But the fact that you explain it like that, I'm like, and I'm thinking, God, didn't I explain it like that? Like, I thought I did, but I obviously missed it, because 2 other people said, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, oh shit, well, shame on me, man. So I'm actually in the process of retooling that and putting together a message for the team and doing that. And you're so right, Elliot. It's like, if you think you've communicated enough, do it 5 times
Double
more.
it,
Like,
you
right?
know?
Like, and we get busy, man. There's 6 problems going on in the day, and you get sidetracked, and it's like, and I'm, you know, everyone's guilty of it. And I think that's a really profound point, Elliot, because you just can't articulate the why strong enough, because they're the ones, you know, in the trenches getting grenades thrown at them, you know. You want to know why, you know, that's important.
100%. Totally. And it's so, you're right. Cause I think the go fast piece of that is so spot on. Because we always, particularly if you're trying to scale a business, you want to go faster, and it's clear in your mind. You know, you may not be able to word for word articulate it, but it's clear up here, you know, like just get it. Come on, you got it. Like, you know, you got it, right, Brett? It's like,
right.
I can see it, but you know, people can't, even when one way you say it is not going to resonate with everybody on your team. And so saying it in 10 different ways is how you can do it. Having one-off conversations, which again feels slow, and it can be slow, but it's that old adage of go slow to go fast, because like you're talking about here, you know, how long has your team been just dealing with it and not really understanding it? Because Brett says we got to do this thing.
Right.
When
there's a level of trust.
Yeah.
There's a level of trust, not to cut you off. There's a level of trust that's important that you've created. You have trust equity with your team to where you're like, hey man, in short periods of gaps, like, I need you to just trust till we get to the other side.
Just do it.
But,
and then
but that only lasts for so long, and that gets eroded away real quick. And you don't want to be asking people to just trust all the time. Like, that's not a good practice. And I know for a fact that over the last 3 months that we've done this, we've just asked people to trust, and it's too big of a project just to ask people to that. You're eroding away your leadership equity when you do that, and it's a mistake.
That's
a money quote.
Yeah. I've got a couple quotes on this one. That's been good, but no, I mean, and it's so, I think we need to think about that not only really in every aspect of our business, of our lives. Like, people don't see things the same way we do every time. Not that they want to do things differently. It's just that you gotta walk them down the path. Right. And it's so easy to skip that step. And ultimately it's always going to force us to go backwards. Right. So, and I don't know if it fits perfectly, but I think I want to hit on it, because you talked about it at One City World Tour before we wrap up. It's not the plane, it's the pilot in the box. Walk through that. Talk just a little bit of how you framed that. And I'm proud. I don't even know if I got the quote right from the movie, but I thought how you took that theme, put it into the topic you were discussing was masterful at that. And I know that you use that with your team. And so you mentioned there that you're kind of trying to retool the messaging there. So talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit, what you talked
Well,
about.
man, I appreciate that very much. That's super cool. You know, that thank you. That means a lot because you're trying to
Absolutely is.
communicate. You're trying to communicate something that resonates. And I don't know about you, but I learned through stories. Like I learned through, well, most of us learned through stories. But like, so Maverick was just an awesome movie, right? Like everybody loves Top Gun.
Awesome.
So, and it was a point in the movie that resonated with me a lot because what we teach in here is to live at cause, right? Like like we say we're a personal development company that happens to sell insurance, right? If we take care of everything from a development standpoint, insurance is easy. If we become better human beings, becoming an insurance agent is easy, right? Like becoming better is easy. Like, so living at cause means taking responsibility and knowing that I'm the most powerful variable, not the market, not the rates, not non-renewals, not a company pulling out, not a new, direct to consumer, tech company coming into the space. Like there's nothing external that is going to be more impactful than me, right? Which is, he says, like it's not the plane, it's the pilot. Meaning, look, man, like the plane's great. And of course you want the nicest fancy gadget from a tech stack standpoint, from carriers and equipped and team members and all the things that are these external planes. But the skills and the craftsmanship that you possess and that you're continuing to gather along the way ultimately is going to be the dictating final factor in you achieving or getting to whatever destination you're looking to achieve. And we at our internal conference that we did, we're focused on client experience this year. We're really putting a heavy emphasis on client experience. And the idea was, it's like, okay, well, what is that and how do we get there? And, if it's not the plane, meaning it's not all this noise that's out there with everything that we all like, there's just so much. It's awesome because there's so many resources, there's so many things that we can gravitate to, which is beautiful, but it's also a false sense of security to say that everything to be successful is lying outside of you. It's one subscription away from me being successful in my agency. And that's a very dangerous, slippery slope to be on. And so that was a point in the movie where it was like, man, there's something here. And it was a message crafted to empower, but also to build on these components and these principles that are very apparent with the science of achievement. And then it's just predicated based on the idea of getting to a destination, which I'll give you those four for the listeners. But, destination, power, tools, and support, right? And so if you're trying to take the plane and get to a destination, right, you're coming off the aircraft carrier trying to get to a destination, these are the four components to get there, but these are the four components for any type of achievement. One being, you got to know where you're going, right? You have to have a clear destination, not I'm going to land in this vicinity. Like you need to know the coordinates. Like you have to be precise. You have to get specific, and clarity is what gives you power here, especially collectively as a group. Like we have to know exactly where we're going. And to your point, Elliot, of why, which I'll land on in the second one. And two is power, right? Like you have to have thrust, right? In our own lives on a Wednesday morning when we get out of bed, that I know that the trainer's coming to my house and I don't want him to show up. Like I need thrust to get me out and do the activity that I need. And to me, that comes down to the meanings that we attach to something. Like what's the reason of why I'm doing it, right? If the more powerful that meaning is and the why, the more I'm going to be able to face adversity and win over it. The wind's not going to blow me over if I have a strong enough reason as to why I'm doing something. Or to your point, Ryan, if I have a strong enough reason why I'm going to write the autos, instead of just, extra money, it's like, well, no, my whole comp plan is centered around it. So therefore the pain is big enough to where that meaning is significantly more than what it was yesterday before that comp plan was changed. And then if we have a strong enough meaning, we've got focus. And if we're focusing on something like where my energy goes, or where my attention goes, the energy flows, right? Like if I focus on something, I'm going to get results from it. And then belief. So in that power, it's meaning plus focus plus belief. equals unstoppable power. That's our thrust. And so, and then belief is just one of those things that, man, like the person that has the biggest belief is just willing to do more than the next guy. Like they just have this it factor. They just have this sense of certainty. They just have this expectation of what is coming, what blessings are coming their way. And I think there's a lot of power involved with that, whether you're starting a business, whether you're a producer walking into an account, whether you're presenting and you expect to get the result just because you just have the high belief. Like belief is a very, very powerful thing. And you can tweak belief, like you can work on belief. Belief isn't just something that's inherent. Belief is something that you can craft every day through listening to podcasts like this right here. People who are listening to this, you're hearing stories that are reaffirming belief to you, or you're in proximity with somebody that's great. The fastest way to get a significant amount of belief is go hang out with somebody that's got just a massive amount of belief, because
you'll feel it.
You can't feel it. And inherently that's going to rub off on you. Yeah. And God forbid you're around 4 or 5 people with big belief. Like you're in trouble. You're not going to be the same person you were if you hang out with those people. And then, patience, right? Like you're not going to, you stair step your way to belief. Like if you're a new producer, you're not going to listen to this podcast and then immediately have a level 10 belief, right? You're going to have more belief than when you started listening. And if you do it long enough, a year from now, you're going to have more belief than you did a year ago. And 10 years from now, you're going to have more belief than you did when you started. So patience and faith, knowing that, look, man, I stair step my way up this game. I just got to stay in the game long enough, I think creates a lot of power for people. And then last two, I'll be quick, is tools, like your aircraft, right? We got to have the tools, like all the tools that we have to our belt. But in my opinion, the biggest tool is personal development. I think the person that lives at cause and the person that works 10 times harder on themselves than they do on being a better insurance agent inherently always wins. They always win. So I'd say, hey, for everything that you read or listen to from an insurance perspective, I mean, you should be reading 10 times more than that, or listening to 10 times more of that on podcasts that have nothing to do with insurance, just have personal achievement, entrepreneurship, sales, communication. Like those skill sets are so much more powerful and potent than what's on an HO3. And then, lastly is support. This to me is the biggest one, and this is what we preach in here, which culture is our buzzword, and we're a culture centric company. Is the people that you surround yourself are inherently going to be the reason why you win, because the support system is what keeps you on track when you go through adversity. And adversity is just part of this deal, right? Adversity is just part of the process, whether you're on the level of which you come into work and you're a great employee, but you're dealing with big time adversity outside of work and you have to bring it in when you're coming to work, or whether you're building a big business and you have all these unbelievably complex, challenging problems that you've never felt with or that you've never dealt with every single day. The headwind of that adversity sometimes you're not bigger than the adversity, but the group is always bigger than the adversity for me. I mean, it keeps me on track. 100%. It keeps me centered, like if I'm around people that are counting on me and I'm counting on them, like it doesn't mean I don't get knocked off the track. It just means I get back up quicker. And that mastermind, as Napoleon Hill would call it, to me has been the greatest impact on my life and my entrepreneurial career, because it allows you to stand on the shoulders of other people when you are decimated. When you're decimated. Yeah. I mean, and I promise you, at some point it's happening. It's coming for you. It's inevitable. Like you don't get to escape. It's the human experience. Like you are going to get a knockout punch, and it's going to come when you least expect it. And it usually comes when we lack humility and we think we're on our high horse and we get slapped down real quick. But at some point or another, it's coming. And to know that, when you look out in the distance, you can see somebody else who says, hey man, I got you. It's okay. I've been there. I've done that. I accept you for who you are. I made it through. Like that to me, from a longevity standpoint, to me is just a massive, massive ingredient for success that I think a lot of people miss, and so getting around the right people and with the right group is such a powerful lever for achievement.
I totally agree. And there's one thing in there too, I was thinking a lot about when you were talking about the belief side is, even thinking about it from the standpoint of your client. Like we talk to our team a lot. I mean, it's really easy to go through the motions sometimes, and get things in place. But you've got to have this deep belief that, if you could send 3 emails to that client leading up to their renewal and they never respond to you and you just, you know what, I'll go ahead and renew it. No big deal. Well, you got to have this belief that if you need to get a hold of them because they need this umbrella or they got to make this change, like, don't just think that you went through the steps and you're okay. Like, have this deep sense of conviction that if I don't
That's
talk
a great
to this
word.
client, they're going to be in trouble, and it changes your perspective.
Totally. So one of the best definitions of sales, I don't know who I got this from, somebody who's way smarter than me, but it was the most profound thing that I have ever heard when someone said define sales. They said it's a transfer of belief. Sales is a transfer of belief. And
wow, yeah.
If someone believes like that, they believe that they've got to get in touch with this person versus the person says, I'd like to get in touch with them so that I can, share this with them. The conviction difference is just massive, and that's going to orient a completely different outcome, not only in getting in touch with somebody, but also transferring the need and the importance of that person to respond to what you're telling them, right? Like, and you can't fake that stuff.
No.
You can't fake that. If you're faking it, that's sleazy, right? Nobody wants to be around that, right? But if it's genuine, movements are started from that, right? Like, and the line is so it's so close together, but yet so far apart. It's fascinating,
It really is.
Well, it changes. It does change your belief, or it changes your perspective and outlook, right? Because if you believe in your tools, right, you believe that you're flying in one of the most highly capable planes that we have, you then start to believe that people out there actually need you, but they don't know about it yet. Like, the only way that they're going to find out about it is because you reach out to them and you tell them your story on the heels of understanding the problems that they're facing. But like, if you go into it with that mindset that people are literally sitting down right now thinking about their problems that you can solve, and they just don't know you exist, and that's your job, you're like, oh shit, yeah, I mean, you're right. Maybe I should just try to reach out to them. And there's going to be several people that are like, yeah, Ryan, I'll take you up on that. Like,
well, so the level of specificity to that is so important, because that's meaning, right? The difference between someone saying I'm bugging somebody versus they have to hear this and I'm going to solve the problem that they're literally wrestling with right now. The conviction difference is only measured in the level of meaning. Their meaning is different, right?
Yep.
So the association that someone has with that communication is going to dictate their effectiveness. It's going to dictate how many calls they make. It's going to dictate their inflection in their voice. It's going to dictate, how persistent they are. Like and that is to the core of starting from the start, which is, what is the reason as to why you're making this call? And I agree with you 100%, Ryan. My dad told a story, he said, about salespeople. He said, there's a person standing on the top of the hill. It's the colonial time. It's the Civil War. And the general's looking down on the mountain. He's watching all these men about to go into battle, and tens of thousands of people are about to be slaughtered on behalf of whatever each side is fighting for. And this guy taps him on the back of the shoulder and says, hey man, I need to talk to you. And he says, not now. Don't you see what I'm doing? This is the biggest moment in my career, and what's happening to all these men? He taps on his shoulder a second time. The guy says, absolutely not. The third time the guy taps on his shoulder, he says, what do you want? And he goes, well, I have this machine gun and I wanted to show it to you. It's a brand new piece of technology. And so the point was, he had the answer to the exact problem that he was facing, but yet he didn't know about it. So the conviction of that salesperson, the conviction of that producer, the conviction of that entrepreneur on whether they're either giving somebody a machine gun to just completely slay the problem at hand, or they're bothering somebody in their most precious time, in their precious moment of the day, has nothing to do with just the meaning that person that's tapping on somebody's shoulder and how they associate to it. So Ryan, that's so profound, man.
Well, as long as we can create the mousetrap that helps them or forces them to start to go down the path of having real meaning around it, right? Like that's it's like full circle back to the pain threshold. Where's your cheddar conversation, because if the machine gun, or if the guy selling the machine gun isn't incentivized to bang on his shoulder 4 times before he just gets, raw
Right.
conviction, then we don't have anything.
Right. It's a great point. Yeah. What is his pain threshold of when he's only gonna tap twice, or
Yeah.
I'm only gonna tap once, because the second
Exactly.
time's not worth it and the third time's not worth it.
Well, and there's another team
Exactly.
on the other side of the mountain that might want my tool.
Oh, there you go. We'll go to the other
Yeah.
side and sell the machine gun.
Right. Like he might require 1 tap, so I might just do that. So it's like,
Right.
Yeah,
no
Yeah.
doubt.
It's all
That's
the levers you
fun.
can pull. So, well, dude, this was fun. Man, we could go a long time talking about this. I'd love
No
to
kidding.
continue, this conversation in the future at some point. So, love what you guys are doing, man. Keep killing it. Everybody check out, what's the name of your podcast? Give everybody kind of an idea what you guys are doing on some of that stuff.
Yeah, the Be Extraordinary podcast. We actually just filmed one in here. There you go.
Ah, there you go.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Boom.
It's the Be Extraordinary podcast. Go to the beextraordinarypodcast.com and check it out. It's just cool conversations about business leadership and personal development. We do talk about some insurance stuff because obviously that's what we love, but more than anything, we just love the process of achievement, and we have those discussions every week. So we'd love to have you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, everybody check it out. These guys are doing some awesome stuff. So hopefully we'll see you in a month or two here when we're down there. We'll
Yeah, man.
get together, dude.
Dude, that'd be awesome, man. I would love that. You guys are great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Coming on, Brett.
Appreciate
Awesome.
both. Yeah. Great to see you, Ryan, and thank you so much. And I appreciate it very much. We'll catch you up in O-Town when you guys come through.
There you go.
Sounds good.